hopefully you learned something from a neighbor and something that kind of warmed your heart a little bit. I have one more thing I want to read, and then I'm going to hand it back to Cheryl. If I could have everybody's attention. If I could have everybody's attention, that would be super. Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully those were good conversations. So I just want to read you a quote from Margaret Wheatley, who is somebody that, a leader and a writer that I think speaks to what just happened here. It's called Turning to One Another. There is no power greater than a community discovering what it cares about. Sorry about that. Ask what's possible, not what's wrong. Keep asking. Notice what you care about. Assume that others may share your dreams. Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Talk to people you know. Talk to people you don't know. Talk to people you never talk to. Be intrigued by the differences you hear. Expect to be surprised. Treat curiosity more than certainty. Invite in everybody who cares to work on what's possible. Acknowledge that everyone is an expert about something. Know that creative solutions come from new connections. Remember, you don't fear people whose story you know. Real listening always brings people closer together. Trust that meaningful conversations can change your world. Rely on human goodness and stay together. And that is what I intend to have us do tonight. That's the intention. I'm going to pass it to Cheryl.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Hi, I'm Cheryl Downey, and I'm going to step over here so that I can see everybody. I am the president of the Mid-Shooks Run Neighborhood Association. And for those of you who may not even know that you have a neighborhood association, it's kind of cutting in and out. Do I need to move? Okay. So we are an association here in Mid-Shooks Run that is just dedicated to trying to make our neighborhood a great place to work, to play, to connect, and to live. And anyone who has a business or a property or resides in the neighborhood is welcome to join. We stay on top of issues such as this one, and so that's one of the reasons that you are here today. And then we also do a number of other great events, and so we have one coming up July 16th, which is our Shooks Run Showcase, where we showcase businesses, food vendors, artists in our neighborhood. And then we also have our ice cream social. We also have our ice cream social coming up, and that is August 28th, 2 to 4, and both of those will be in the park just north of Willamette. You've already met Nancy, so I did want to also invite Brandon just to wave at all of you. He's the owner of Switchback, and we're very, very grateful. Thank you, Brandon, for hosting us. If I could ask, if you are sitting on a table, if you could please try to find a different seat. The tables are just not designed to hold anything strong, heavier than a coffee cup. So if we could just be respectful of the property, that would be great. And then I wanted to introduce our two other guests this evening. So we have Ted and, give me your last name, Richard. And then we have Aaron Ebert from City Planning, and Ted is a consultant on the project. So this meeting was a significant event to pull together, and I just wanted to let you know that we did have some hiccups along the way. So, for example, some emails that I was getting from Nancy ended up in my spam folder, and so we were moving full speed ahead in spite of her having gotten some emails that like some things had shifted and asking us to maybe wait. So I did want to thank all of them for showing up, even though this was not your desired timeline. We had already kind of unleashed the social media, and there was no pulling it back at that point in time. So I do very much appreciate that. And I want to go over what our format is going to look like. We are going to do a Q&A. What's going to happen is if you have a question, if you are able, I would appreciate it if you can come up to this spot and ask your question so that people can actually see you and connect with you. If you wouldn't mind starting with your first name, just so that we all remember that we are human beings. I think that's not a bad idea, starting with your first name. And the way I envisioned this was kind of running two lines, although we already have a line happening here of people just standing. So that might not work so well, but if you could kind of be ready to step up and take your spot to take the question so that we're not wasting time running the mic around the room, I would really appreciate that. If you are unable to move or would prefer that I bring the mic to you, we've got a mobile unit and we'll try to do that so that if anybody has mobility issues, you don't have to get up and, kind of come on over here. I am going to keep us to 3 minutes per person because we obviously have a lot of people here, and so I'm guessing there are a lot of questions to be asked. I do have my phone set. I have tried to pick a number or a musical piece that will go off that will hopefully make you feel like you're being played off the stage after you've won an Oscar. So please try to put that, envision that in your mind as you're being cut off. But that's you've just won something and it's your time to mosey off. Just a reminder that this proposal has generated a lot of passion. Obviously, you're all here. And I have had more than one neighbor reach out and just express a desire that this is a respectful, calm conversation. And so that's just my expectation. That is what we're going to do. We're going to be respectful of one another. We are all neighbors, and at the end of the day, we are all neighbors, right? And that is so important that there's somebody you can reach across the fence in the middle of a pandemic and say, hey, I am out of butter or eggs or whatever, right? And that's who we are, and that's who we're going to continue to be. So one more piece, just as far as format goes. If we seem to hit a topic that there's a lot of commonality, like if we're hitting the same topic again and again, I may pause us, kind of take a temperature of the room, just around a show of hands of how many people have similar thoughts on that topic. And then we may camp there for a moment and just try to capture any additional thoughts that haven't already been captured on that topic so that we can then kind of close that item out and not just be redundant and kind of hit the same thing again and again and again. We're going to go until about 7:20. At that point in time, I'm going to try to do a summary of what we've covered, and then we're going to talk together about possible next steps, what is going to happen next. One of the things that we already know we're planning on doing is writing a letter out of all of this. We do have our Mid-Chicks Run Neighborhood Association secretary trying to frantically take notes for us here today, and we'll be crafting a letter out of all of this. But I'm sure there's going to be other next steps as well. With that, any questions before we get going? No? Okay. So I'm actually going to ask the first question of Nancy, and that is, obviously there were two proposals were under consideration, and the goal of all of this has been to increase and improve east-west corridor, east-west transit. And so one of the options was to, basically Boulder would sort of be that, and it was going to result in no parking on Boulder, is my understanding. By all means, you guys can jump in if I've got it wrong. And there was going to be rapid bus transit and bike lanes on Boulder. That's not the proposal that ended up being recommended. Now we're down to that there would be a one-way couplet on Boulder and Platte through this neighborhood. So Boulder would run west, Platte would run east, is my understanding, and each of them would have rapid transit and bike lanes in addition to traffic. So we've come down to that one proposal at this point in time, and what I'm wondering is if you could speak to the timeline from here. I think there's been a lot of questions around when does public comment end? And at what point, if it was to come before City Council, when would that point be? And then what would be the process from there?
Thank you, Cheryl. So my understanding most recently is that public comment is closed on June 15th. However, I'm looking at both of you, and that may be changing because of a potential additional offering that we're going to have for folks in this neighborhood, right? So it will really be extended, and I don't know what the new latest date is. At that point, it will come, is this the last piece of all of Connect COS? There's other pieces of Connect COS that are still being addressed? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so these guys actually are much more involved in the running of this. I do a lot of things on city council. This is one of many. I will say that whenever it does come to city council for a vote, it will be one of many, many projects in Connect COS. And I have asked very specifically, because there might be, and not just in this neighborhood or this district, there might be other projects across the city that other neighborhoods are opposing, that city council will always have the opportunity to, we won't have to vote on the entire thing as is, yes or no. We can always make amendments or requests or changes. So that would always be possible. In order for that to pass, it would require 5 of the 9 city council members to vote for whatever that change might be. So that's just information for you for whenever it does come to city council. I believe that the goal had been to get this in front of city council in July. Is that not necessarily? Okay, yeah, Connect COS.
Yeah, I think it's
December? Oh, okay, I'll see what I know. So that's what that's that question. The answer to that question. Do you want to add to that?
Okay. So once again, Aaron Egbert with City Car Springs. I'm an engineer, not a planner. So thank you.
I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay. So I'm a senior engineer for the City Car Springs. I'm the project manager for the Platte Corridor study. I was actually part of the team that developed the study itself for the 2012 PPRTA ballot because of some bridge issues that we had. One of the other pieces for the history was the intermodal transportation plan, which now is being updated with the Connect COS, was done in about 2000. And that requested that the city study a connection of Platte Avenue to I-25 ahead of doing any other type of improvements, specifically the Constitution extension. So that got rolled into this project as well. But what we're planning on doing is in about 6 weeks kind of time frame, we want to do another workshop charrette character. We're going to hire a facilitator to come in and have discussions with this same group. So this is not your last chance to comment on this project. I work for local government. There's never a last chance to comment on a project. I mean, we get comments from day one to the end of the project. So, and we're really excited to see so many people here. That's great. We mailed out 7,890 newsletters to this neighborhood to try to get this kind of a group together so we could have these good discussions.
Sorry, just to clarify, part of the reason there is a deadline listed of June 15th for comments, that's comments on the material that was presented at this last round of public meetings that hopefully, I know I see a lot of familiar faces, so I know you made it, some of you made it to those meetings. We do have to provide some kind of deadline just so we get input on that. But based on that, I can tell you right now, based on the feedback that we've heard, that's where we've decided to go, is to back this up a little bit and take another look at specifically the central segment of the Platte Avenue corridor. There are other segments and all those need to work together. But let me see, I think it was last fall, we did some character area workshops in each of those character areas. We did have attendance from residents in this neighborhood and others. Unfortunately, we were working under COVID. Everything was virtual, and we understand that was a challenge. Obviously, this project is important to this neighborhood. We want to get this right as bad as you do. So we are going to back this up. We're going to revisit why we're doing the project, what the goals and objectives for this neighborhood should be. And what I would challenge everyone to do is if that's the meeting, we definitely need this kind of attendance. I can't tell you what the agenda or the format is yet. We're working on putting together something that is inclusive, but also gets through some specific questions that need asked and answered. One of the things before you leave tonight is we do need to talk about what times of day, what days of the week, should we be looking at scheduling that so that we can get this kind of turnout?
If you remind me, I'll try to cover that in the summary. We'll try to get a sense of that. Okay, who has a question? Right up front and center. Just your first name if you don't mind, so that everybody knows who you
Hi
are.
guys, I'm very well. I'm used to speaking into a microphone like this. I'm Eleanor. Nice to meet you guys. I think I've met some of you before. My questions are kind of multi-part just because they have short answers, and I'm curious about the data. I've had a hard time getting the same answers from different people at the different meetings, so I think this might be, is it Eric? Aaron, I think this might be an Aaron question, or series of questions. What are the exact dates that the initial study started and stopped to begin with?
So,
For traffic flow, yes. For traffic flow on Platte and Boulder.
oh, okay. So what we did was we have a project right now out where we're replacing the bridges over Sand Creek, Platte over Sand Creek. So we did a series of traffic counts before we started that project, which was before COVID.
So what were the dates of that?
I think it was in like August, September timeframe. So we do it during the school.
Of like 2018, 19?
I believe it was 19.
Okay, so is it correct, the study started in 2019 in August or September and then went, that's not correct?
That's when those traffic counts were conducted.
Right, and that's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about, yeah. So the traffic count started then, and then when did those end? I haven't been able to get that answer.
Okay, we can provide you the specific times of when those traffic counts were conducted, but those were conducted over a 1-week period. The city provided us those numbers. But then we went through an extensive process of correlating those with data that we took during COVID and historical counts. We used some other data called Streetlight that tracks mobile devices and gives us a good indication of overall travel patterns and volumes. And we did basically we collaborated or adjusted all those traffic counts based on what we were seeing for both pre-COVID and post-COVID conditions.
What are the numbers that you're seeing in like, right now, 2022, post-COVID, on Boulder and then Platte?
I'm not sure I have these at the tip of my head, but it's around 10,000 vehicles per day on Boulder and about 18,000 vehicles per day on Platte.
Okay, where can we access that study or that data?
We can, if it's not on the project website, that's something that we can get up there.
Can I make a suggestion, actually? Yeah, okay. I'm just wondering, and this will probably other questions that they don't have the answers to in their heads. I can make a list of specific things, and if we can just get that back to you, Cheryl, and you can distribute.
Yes.
So I will.
Yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
So I just want to make sure I got the question
Sure,
right then. So just repeat this very specific question, the data that you want.
Okay, so traffic flow data on Boulder and Platte, dates when that study began, dates that study ended, any additional efforts made to extrapolate data from that based on COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID, comprehensive view, where we can access the data and exact, or relatively exact numbers of vehicles that we're seeing now in this post-COVID world.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we actually took some of those traffic counts before we had a consultant on board because we just wanted to make sure the data was as pure as possible and people weren't avoiding the corridor for other construction activity.
Another question? Are you able to?
Yeah.
Because I'm recorded now. We've somehow switched mics. Yeah.
Nice speaker.
There you go. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Chris Malley. How you doing? Now, first thing, what's going to happen to high school? Going to shut it down? High school?
We are not shutting down.
Hang on just a second. Nobody's hearing anything over anybody's stereo there. Somebody's got, okay. Can you repeat the question?
Are you going to shut down Palmer High School?
No, sir, we are not shutting down Palmer High
What
School.
about the traffic safety with the high school students?
We have improvements, but the lane reduction in the downtown segment, which we feel will be a lot safer for the students as they cross in to get into Acacia Park, and we'd be eliminating left turns around General Palmer.
Okay.
So we've got some improvements to try to make that safer for vehicles, pedestrians, and students.
Okay, now you're going to remove General Palmer statue?
We are not removing General Palmer. We had to choose our battles here, and that was a vote of the people to move that statue.
Okay, our house was built in 1892, it's a sort of landmark. Does that have any effect on this project? Nothing's changing or altering the terrain around it?
I think this project that we have right here is only a corridor study. We do not have any funding for construction. We do not have design plans. That all gets worked out kind of through the process if we did need to acquire any property. But the whole goal of this project is to work within the existing footprints that we have today.
Are you going to use borrow municipal bonds to pay for this, or how are you going to pay for it?
We have not determined any funding source at this
Okay,
time.
most of the prognosticators, like Stephen Forbes and Jamie Dimon and Robert Schiller, Nobel Peace Prize winner in economics, said there's a hurricane or tornado coming in our economy. They're ready to go into a deep recession. Now, if we go into a deep recession, hypothetically, you probably won't have the money to float this. Is that correct? I understand you're trying to project, but
All I can speak to is typically we do not borrow money for these projects. So we don't do a bonding program. It's a pay-as-you-go, cash-as-you-go for our funding sources.
I'm confused. Explain it more.
Either general fund dollars. We have like a funding source with the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority. It's a 1-cent sales tax that comes in for capital projects and maintenance.
Okay,
We go after federal grants, those type of things, but we do not have a bonding program.
Okay, so
anymore.
not bond, just tax.
It's just taxes, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Who else has a question?
Hi, my name is Monica. I was wondering, is there any safety reasons that you were considering making Boulder one way and Platte the other? Or is it just for traffic flow, or does that help facilitate neighborhood safety?
So the one-way couplet, why did we even come up with that idea? Multiple reasons. If you happen to look at any of our material that's published online or that was available at the website or available at the open houses, we identified some functional objectives that we needed to meet with the Platte Avenue corridor, and talking about corridor wide. Safety was certainly an important element of that. We also needed to meet both current and future traffic capacity needs. In the Middle Shooks Run and Nob Hill areas, actually in the whole corridor, one of the primary drivers was to try and better align traffic character with the character of the neighborhoods. So we looked at a lot of different options. The two that were talked about earlier were two of the ideas, kind of exploring a range of options. One of those was doing the lane reduction just on Boulder, providing a dedicated transit lane, leaving Platte pretty much like the way it is, although we were trying to introduce some traffic calming elements on Platte Avenue to reduce some speeds there. The one-way couplet idea came about, well, how can we more effectively meet all of these functional objectives to protect the character of the neighborhoods, to reduce travel speeds, while still providing the capacity that's needed. And a one-way couplet properly designed could do that. The one-way couplet allows us to reduce the total number of travel lanes from 8 to 4, and still provides the same enough capacity to handle forecast 2045 year traffic. It does that because a one-way couplet runs about 20% more efficiently than a two-way street, because we don't have to provide time on the signals for left turn arrows. With that reduction in lanes, it also shortens crossing times for pedestrians. And there happens to be, from our analysis, a pretty significant occurrence of bike and pedestrian-related accidents in the corridor. It also provides us an opportunity to provide some improvements on Platte Avenue that we can't otherwise do. Without lane reduction, it allows us to provide more green space in front of the homes on Platte, move traffic further away from the fronts of houses. We understood that it has impacts on Boulder, including putting more traffic on Boulder. We also understood it changed access to different people's homes. And we did not make that recommendation just so that we could get this kind of attendance at a public meeting. We're very grateful for this, and we're anxious to have the discussion with you about how else, what other ideas do we have to achieve those same objectives of increasing safety, mitigating travel speeds, and still providing that traffic capacity.
So it's a net win for Platte and net loss for Boulder, basically.
So
More
I'm
green
gonna
space
ask,
on
I'm gonna
Platte,
ask that we
more
stick-
cars on Boulder.
I'm gonna ask that we stick to our format and stick to whoever has the mic and
Ted, Chris Merrick, sound man, and a little bit of neighborhood. So on that, the research, and I sent this down to the city at the expert here. There's a lot of research online that points to increased risk to pedestrians, motor vehicles, increased crime with one-ways. And everything that I find online, the internet told me, everything that I find online is pointing towards cities undoing these and regretting them and spending more money after the bad outcomes. If you could just speak to that, since you were kind of in that vein.
Okay, great question. Yes, we did. We looked at the reference. Actually, the link you provided is one we also use from Strong Towns USA, I believe. That same website has articles talking in favor of one-way couplets as a contrast to what we call stroads, which are streets that have so much traffic on them that they become, instead of serving the adjacent land uses, they serve as throughput devices for traffic. So a properly designed one-way couplet, or a couplet designed for this situation, could meet those objectives. Part of what it takes is most one-way couplets that get bad reputation for how they serve neighborhoods is because they're designed to move traffic at high speeds through neighborhoods. But that is not the recommendation, that was not the alternative that we came up with. We actually talked to the city about, if we put in, if we made this a one-way couplet, can we introduce more signals, shorten that signal spacing to quarter-mile spacing, which is more appropriate for an urban roadway like this. With those additional signals, it lets us better mitigate travel speeds because we can set those signals up for people to, so that the green lights happen at your desired speed. So properly implemented, a one-way couplet does have those benefits.
who has a question next? Over here. Should be live.
Hi, my name is George. Going on, talking more about the one-way aspect of it. So we have one-way streets downtown currently with Bijou, and I've traveled that quite a lot going up and down Tejon. There have been numerous times I've seen people try to go east on Bijou with the one-way west. So we already have a problem in the city with one-way streets. Why is Boulder and Platte coming one-way going to be different than what we already have? We already have an issue with how it's going to meet that. So, do you think there's going to be any difference with here compared to what we already have?
I think, again, that's a question that needs asked and answered through the design process. There are implementations of one-way couplets in many urban settings that do work. The Bijou-Kiowa couplet is a challenge because it's such a short distance. And the split isn't that great. Basically, that's one of the reasons why the study actually recommended that we reduce one of those lanes on the Bijou-Kiowa pair so that we can make that feel more like a downtown street.
So with the one-way, so I mean, the one thing that they don't have downtown, the elementary school right here on Boulder. I mean, I don't know about you, but 7-year-old kids don't always look left and right, and someone decides to make a wrong turn down the one way and accidentally hits a kid. It's a lot bigger deal than, I mean, obviously, an adult not knowing which way to look. So it falls back on the driver, and it's a really big safety issue being right here in front of the school at all times of the day. I know Chris walks his kids to school all the time. I see him. Our kid goes way out Platte, and I see the traffic every morning at 7:30 to 8 o'clock, going from Platte all the way past Powers to take him to school. So traffic doesn't seem that bad to me currently. I know you're trying to predict the future, but there's a lot of safety concerns, especially in the community with a lot of small kids that are growing up, and they're going to be traveling these streets in a number of years. They're going to be biking up and down these streets by themselves in a number of years. And we want to make sure that they're safe.
Wow. I just had like 5 hands go up. I did see you, and I did see you, and I did see you. I am going to try to work this section just a little minute because they haven't gotten much.
Hi, my name is Julia, and I was wondering if you've considered the impact on Memorial Hospital access.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, hold it for a second.
we've been
By show of hands, I'm gonna, because clearly we've got a little something going on in the room. By the show of hands, how many people are concerned about Memorial Hospital? Okay. I think that's just about everybody.
And the concern is that people can get access to the hospital in a timely manner.
It's one way.
Yeah, we've met with UC Health. They're the leasee. The city actually owns that property and has a 100-year lease with CU Health. So we've been working with them. We've had probably 5 meetings, 6 meetings. We're working on doing an ambulance workshop, and we've identified like 6 different alternative routes on how we could get ambulances to the hospital. We've also offered up to use our GIS system to kind of say if an ambulance has to get from this point over at Cardo College, how long will it take them to get there with a one-way versus a 2-way Boulder. So we're working through all that stuff with the hospital. I won't lie to you, they are concerned about change just like you're concerned about change. It's the same thing. And they're as concerned about their people getting to the services as much as the ambulance is getting there, because they do have a lot of medical services that they provide to the citizens.
And also, just so you know, I have also met with a number of leaders at Memorial Hospital. They are requesting and having meetings with all city council members, so as well as the chief of staff. And so I guarantee you Memorial Hospital is, I'm sure they're very happy to have your support, and they are advocating very, very clearly for their interests. So just so you know, they are doing that.
Kind of as a side note, I worked on that safety project on Platte where we put in those right turn only kind of concepts. And at that time, the neighborhood's relationship with the hospital was pretty strained. So I'm glad that they've been able to work with you guys and kind of work through these issues. And you guys are both advocates for each other, so that's great to see.
So this is where I'm going to pause for just a minute. Is there other items specifically regarding access to the hospital in the proposed one-way that did not get covered?
I actually work at the hospital. I had a question about that myself.
Okay. I'm going to just walk the mic around to all those hands. If you could just kind of put your item in there, and then we'll let you guys address all those at once if possible. So try. Yeah.
My name is Jeff. I'm a homeowner on Platte, and I work at Memorial Hospital. I am gravely concerned that the planning that's been put into how ambulances are going to get in and out of the hospital on a daily basis is insufficient. I can tell you how many ambulances I see move in and out of it. I work with parking and traffic enforcement over at the hospital, so I see the cars, I know where people are going. And I don't know that the volume of ambulances and people coming in and out of that hospital has been sufficiently addressed, and how heavily that's going to affect traffic getting snarled on that side of the one-way couplet over there by the hospital, I think it's going to be really detrimental to that neighborhood.
Hospital.
Yes. So you talk about, hi, I'm Dory. So you're talking about alternative routes. That's the concern right there. They're not going to be using Boulder. They're not going to be using Platte. They're going to be using alternative routes. And you said 4, 5, 6, whatever. What are those alternative routes? Willamette? Prospect? What? And those are the concerns because we live on those streets.
Yeah.
That's where our homes are.
So I'm going to ask you not to answer that yet. We're going to try to get all of the other hospital, was there another hand regarding hospital?
I know you guys are sick of hearing from me, but I'm an ICU doctor at the hospital. In stroke and heart attacks, minutes are lives.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to comment directly or editorialize, but saying change is hard, it doesn't help buy-in. These are legitimate concerns. And I say that as a healthcare provider and resident of this neighborhood, and being in very close contact with the C-suite, not that they care about what I say. I'm saying,
Okay, hang on,
all right.
hang on.
I was just asking to avoid talk of change is hard. These are legitimate concerns as a neighborhood that we have, and legitimate concerns as an ICU doctor I have to say, well, the ambulance drivers can find a way. That's not acceptable from the hospital standpoint, I know that for certain, and it's also not acceptable from a neighborhood perspective. We use this hospital, right? And so if we could avoid that and speak to plans, next steps, not change is hard.
Okay, so after, just 1 second, we may be able to close that out. Based on the applause, I'm guessing we feel like maybe that was captured well. Is there any other final comment regarding the hospital before we give them a chance to respond? Go.
One more.
Well, I'm sorry, I missed it.
I'm concerned about, Memorial Hospital's been here for I don't know how many.
A little closer to your mouth.
I don't know how many years Memorial Hospital has been here, but it's a regional hospital. So there are people coming from all over southern Colorado. They know the route to get here from the highway. Minutes count, like the doctor said. I'm concerned about that as well, not just the ambulance traffic getting there, but everyone else.
Okay, so we're going to close out our questions about the hospital. We're going to let our panel address that, and then we're going to move on, because I'm sure there are other issues as well. And it seems like we have a fair amount of unity in our concerns in that area.
Okay, so I don't know that I can answer some of the ambulance route questions. That's what we're going to try to work through with that workshop with them. So we're still kind of doing that. But if you just, and I oversimplify this, and I'm sorry, but the one-way couplet makes access to the hospital faster from the north, from the east, from the south, and it just doesn't from the west. So when seconds matter, we're actually helping in 3 of the 4 directions. But we're working through that 4th direction. And then the other thing to factor in is it's only going to get more congested in 2045 and take longer for the ambulances to get to the hospital with a do-nothing approach. So I just want to kind of focus on that, have the group think through that a little bit, that as traffic volumes continue to increase, it's going to be more and more difficult for those ambulances to get to the hospital.
Okay, so we're going to press on to other, I did see some hands over here, if I can, and I apologize, there's no way I'm going to keep a queue in my head going at this point.
Are we limited to 3 minutes too? Or?
We're trying.
She did.
My name is Alan, and I want to talk about an alternative. Right now, Platte Avenue is a major access point to downtown Colorado Springs. And if we change it to Boulder one way,
Mike, a little closer to your mouth.
if we change it to Boulder going one way downtown, it doesn't really go to downtown. It fizzles out at Cascade. So if I'm a stranger driving into downtown Colorado Springs and I catch, Boulder meets with Platte and I come downtown, I'm going to end up at Cascade and Boulder Street and really be nowhere. I'm not downtown. There's a business district there. There's a couple of churches. There's a bank. You're not downtown. So this is my question. Why not think about Pikes Peak Avenue? If you're traveling west on Pikes Peak Avenue, starting at Academy, all the north-south major streets intersect with Pikes Peak Avenue. Academy, Chelton, Circle, Union, Nevada, they all intersect. So that means north-south traffic can enter Pikes Peak Avenue. You get downtown, and near that Catalyst campus area, you can veer right and stay on Pikes Peak Avenue. You enter right into downtown on Pikes Peak Avenue. You're within walking distance of all the restaurants, all the clubs, all the nightlife, all the parking, the city administration building, the county administration building. Everything downtown that you go downtown for is right off of Pikes Peak Avenue. In fact, if you don't know this, the 0 point for addresses in Colorado Springs is the corner of Pikes Peak Avenue and Cascade. You can't get more downtown, 0 point of addresses. So back up a minute and go back to Catalyst campus. If you veer left, you get on Colorado Avenue. That takes you to all the places west. That takes you to Old Colorado City, it takes you to Manitou, it takes you to the new Olympic Museum, to the new Summit House at Pikes Peak Avenue, it takes you to I-25, US 24, and if you keep going, you get to the mountains. I mean, isn't that a more logical way to get downtown, either downtown directly or through downtown to go west, than it is to end up at Boulder and Cascade, where the street kind of ends and you're neither downtown or at Colorado College or anywhere else. So, long question, I'm sorry.
And Alan, I have no response other than when you told me that the other night at one of our public meetings, that I said, absolutely, that's something that should be considered. Pikes Peak is a little bit more difficult because it serves a little bit different travel corridor. But it's certainly something that as we have this upcoming workshop, I am certain we will be looking at.
And I add one more point to that.
I'd stopped your time already, so, and we're going to stick with the mic. So if you don't mind getting back in the queue, because I have so many people waiting. Okay. I saw so many hands. Brandon, yours was up at one point.
There's one right.
Oh, in the doorway. We have a doorway question.
Hello, my name is Kia Delio. I'm here because my main concern is some of the schools that are along this centralized here. I've lived here for over 30 some odd years. I've lived downtown. And it doesn't seem as though that the children are much of the concern. I mean, there's Palmer. I have a son that goes to Palmer, and many other people I know have children that go there. And I also have a daughter that attends Columbia, and I'm just wondering what it is that you guys are trying to propose that is a safer route, as well as, I think you mentioned something about the speeding, as well as, has there been a lot of accidents, as well as like injuries, as far as on the Platte Avenue and Boulder Avenue Street?
So, yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that some of the safety analysis we did and things we heard from residents and stakeholders, quite honestly, was that pedestrian safety was very much a concern. The data shows us there's a higher than, compared to other urban arterials in the city, incidents of pedestrian and bicycle injury crashes. And so we are trying to address that. Palmer High School certainly was in the front of our mind as we looked at what could we do on that segment of Platte Avenue downtown. I mean, I see those kids walk out of school every day to go to lunch and flood those streets and go over diagonally across to Acacia Park. And yeah, I know I would like to do something on that street before something terrible happens that we don't want to talk about. And that is why we try to devote more space to the pedestrian areas along Platte Avenue in that downtown section with the lane reduction. It's also why we had some of the improvements around the General Palmer statue. We didn't recommend removing the General Palmer statue because quite honestly, we got as strong a sentiment from people to leave him there as to move him. Some people identify that statue as being iconic to the city of Colorado Springs. But we can make improvements for how traffic moves around that. In this Middle Shooks Run character area, as we call it in the study, your neighborhood, it's also why we looked at, one of the things we looked at in both scenarios was doing a lane reduction so that we could minimize those crossing distances and provide more space to pedestrians on either side of the street. And also, as I mentioned earlier, yes, you are correct, to try and reduce travel speeds on a more consistent basis.
Hi, my name is Otis. I live on Platte near Arcadia. I have a question about like things maybe you didn't consider, like parking for people who live here. Not every house has off-street parking. The house behind me just rented for $2,800 a month. For most working people, that means 4 or 5 roommates. Where are they going to put their cars? As you look in backyards, most of the houses on my block have 1 or 2 cottages behind the main house that they rent out. There's not enough parking now. And the other, I don't want to be like rude or super passionate about this, but
Passionate's okay, rude's not.
exactly. The city can't manage to keep the lights timed downtown. They did work on one intersection in Kiowa like 6 years ago when the lights still aren't fixed. I don't trust the city to maintain anything. And are you going to work with the city transit? Like, what good is a bus lane? How's that not a colossal waste of money if there aren't more buses running more frequently, running earlier and running later? It takes an hour and 45 minutes to get from downtown to Powers on a city bus, if everything goes well. If everything goes well, an hour and 45 minutes to go 8 miles, 9 miles. Why a bus lane?
Well, I won't speak to the signal timing downtown. That's not my,
You're a city engineer, right?
No, I'm an engineer in the city engineering group.
Oh.
That would be the city traffic engineer. The lights downtown are timed for pedestrians to cross on like a 4 feet per second. So they'll feel like they're timed inappropriately potentially for a vehicle, but it's more time for a pedestrian to cross, just to help out with that. The whole goal for the city here, and Ted can probably talk to this, but the goal is to get Academy Boulevard on 15-minute intervals for the buses. To get Boulder. Boulder is the highest ridership of any bus in the city of Colorado Springs right now, so we're trying to enhance that. Get that on a 15-minute interval. Also get Nevada Avenue on a 15-minute interval, so it's more of kind of an H kind of system. It can kind of get people, more choice riders to destinations. We've also got the downtown shuttle now that's looping around Colorado College down to switchbacks. So we're making great strides as a city with our transit system, and we're really trying to just take it to the next level with some of these improvements that we're proposing. So, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'd say the dedicated transit lanes is a feature for accomplishing that so that we can make those travel times more competitive with cars, as Aaron said, so we can attract more choice riders. Because that is how we try to limit the growth of traffic through these neighborhoods. That was actually one of the strategies, is how can we take the top off the expected traffic growth.
We do have another doorway question. Did you need to ask something?
Well, I just want to thank you. I mean, we need better transit in Colorado Springs. There's no question about it. And one of the goals of the study, as I had been presented to me, was equity and increasing multimodal transportation. So it is something that's very important in our city.
Hello. Just to, I live in the neighborhood. I do a lot of bicycling, and in many ways the city is really just not bicycle friendly. I fear a push to make the bicyclists only use the bicycling lanes on designated roads. Within the past 4 days, my husband and I had a chance to be bicycling north along Tejon, and there was virtually no traffic. It was late in the day, but with these new, between downtown and Colorado College, where they put these landings, I suppose, for the access for this trolley or whatever it is. I think it was at Willamette and Tejon, they project so far into the travel lanes that there are only 2 lanes for cars and nothing else. Because when we had an option to either go around the peninsula, stay in the traffic lane, which is our choice, or to use the handicap ramp in the gutter, which was not our choice. And since there was virtually no traffic, there was 1 car, and he happened to go through that pinch point when we did, and he had to go into the oncoming lane to avoid us.
I'm gonna ask you to bring it back to this project.
Yeah, but my question is, why should I trust what the city wants to do with this, whatever this nonsense is with Boulder and Platte, when they can't make a sensible plan for a little project like on Tejon?
I don't know how to answer your question about trust, actually. That's a longer conversation. I'd love to have coffee with you sometime. Feel free to reach out to me. I do want to say on that particular point, though, and I'm a cyclist, I rode a bike ride over here. I ride my bike all over. And I agree with you on that cutout, and I am actually waiting for an answer on that from Kate Brady, who is our bicycle planner for the city of Colorado Springs. There should be, and it looks like there is, but I don't know why we're not using it, a gutter that, not a gutter, that's not the right terminology, you probably know what it is, but a place, it's not a gutter, it's intentionally built place for the cycle to go so that you don't have to bump out in traffic. And I don't know the answer to the question, but I have the question in. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm advocating for you, is what I'm trying to say. I'm advocating for you on that. I agree with you about that.
Bicycles have to stay out of the gutters.
Okay, I misused a term. It's not a gutter. There's a way to make bicycles go through those without having to go into traffic. I have the same concern you do. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Thanks.
So I'm going to go right here.
Yes, my name's Rick, and I was calling.
Sorry, that was somebody else.
And I was calling, I wanted to ask about, speaking of bike lanes, converting the medians here on Platte, going and scraping those off trees and everything, and making those into a bike lane and making it into mass transit lane.
So I just want to be clear, is that a question about that or is that a suggestion?
Well, it's a question. Why? What's the rationale behind it? Why does that make sense to go and destroy something that's beautiful and go in and actually helps make it a little bit cooler? We don't have as much concrete and asphalt as we would after if you guys do what you would like to do.
So I think if I'm getting it, you're talking about the part of the proposal that would take the trees out and eliminate the median on Platte.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
All right. So that is one of the realities of implementing that one-way couplet. We talked about that with, in our earlier workshops, our one-on-one stakeholder meetings. We asked people, would you rather have that, does that space serve you better in the middle of the street that's full of traffic, or if we move that same green space to the edges of the street where it's adjacent to your house, would it be more useful? And what we heard was, yeah, that sounds reasonable. Not from everybody, but yes, we heard it enough that that is one of the reasons why that alternative advanced. With the one-way couplet, again, we're reducing the number of travel lanes on Platte significantly, and those landscaped areas, those tree lawns along Platte get significantly wider, up to, in most cases, it's almost 50 feet that would be allocated to either side of the street. So that's a trade-off. And again, a lot of this project is about trade-offs, because we have a lot of ambitions that we're trying to meet with safety, with handling traffic, and with trying to protect the character of the neighborhoods. And it does result in trade-offs. And that's really the purpose why this is only a study right now and not a design project, is we're trying to work with you to explore what those trade-offs are and what does the community value.
Right here.
Hi, my name is Adrian, and one of my questions was, involving with this study, what have you guys seen, or how would this implementation help with all people cutting through all these side streets here? Because I can tell you now, living on one of these side streets, I live right next door, people blast through Institute just to catch the light over there. So I can only imagine people, when we have to go one direction, a lot of people are going to say, oh no, I'm going the wrong way. I'm going to cut through all these neighborhoods and side streets in order to get to the street I want to go on. So I just want to know what your thoughts have been with that in mind.
And the alleys too.
So somebody said in the alleys. Okay, so obviously we've hit another one of those issues, right? And I've heard people talk about this as like the rails on the ladder, right? They're concerned about the streets that effectively, if Platte is one side of the ladder and Boulder is the other side of the ladder, the connecting streets in between are the rails. I've heard a lot of people talk about that. So go right ahead.
So again, we actually call them ladder streets as well. They're very important to figuring out if this will work for the community or not. We understand the concern. We're working on ways to mitigate that. Certainly part of adding the additional signals along Platte and Boulder kind of helps determine which streets may be more impacted than others. And that's some of the feedback we heard in those earlier character area workshops as well. Don't put the signal on my street, because I don't want people turning around my street. So that's one of the things we still need to work through. Again, the alternative that was shown showed the most promise for addressing the most of the ambitions that we had, developed through our public process. But it's not without challenges. I think this is one of those topics that is something that we're going to really have to dig into in this next character area workshop, and lay out exactly where those additional signals might be and how we might mitigate some of those impacts to those lateral streets. Before we move on, I did want to touch on one other thing, because someone brought up parking and said, what role did that play in this? Again, that was one of the pushbacks we got with some of our earlier work through those character area workshops, through our we had open office hours where people could call in and talk to us. We heard how important parking was, and we actually changed. And I'm not sure which version of the typical sections got handed out here, but originally we showed bike lanes on Boulder along with a dedicated transit lane and the 2 lanes of traffic. And people told us no, parking was more important. We've changed that, and now we're showing that, okay, it's basically the same configuration, but that both the incremental and the transformative options provide full on-street parking on Boulder and on most of Platte. Of course, Platte is not the same width all the way through, and so there's between Hancock and Union, there's a narrow section. We've talked a lot with those neighbors, have been very active in our public meetings. We'll continue to work with them to see, what that final design, or what that design should look like. And again, to Aaron's point, there is no funding right now for design or construction. This is a study to look at what improvements might be made to address all these concerns, from the basic infrastructure concerns of some bridges that need replaced sooner rather than later, some intersections at Circle and Union that certainly need attention from a traffic and safety perspective sooner rather than later. But if we just do those spot by spot improvements, we lose an opportunity to think about the future. And that's really the purpose of the study.
I did, before we close out the whole idea of like those rails on the ladder, I wanted to find out if anybody had other kinds of comments that we haven't already captured. I think Cindy was, and then I saw two people here.
So thank you guys for coming tonight. We appreciate it.
Real close.
I don't live on the ladder, I live on Willamette. And we've talked about this in Zoom calls starting back in January. And Willamette is defined as part of the corridor. And at that time, I asked if there had been any traffic study done on Willamette because we have so much cut-through traffic. We have such high speeds. And I'm concerned it's going to get worse when people are avoiding one-way streets. They've already told me they will use Willamette. And I don't know how you assess the impact of changes without doing studies of the entire corridor before and after. And what I was left with, I was told if I wanted a traffic study done, I needed to initiate that with the city myself. I don't think that's an acceptable suggestion, but again, how do you put forward a proposal if you haven't actually studied all of the corridor that's impacted by this one-way couplet?
And then before you answer that, I'm going to capture these other people that had like those rail kind of comments, so we can try to do it all at once.
My name is Martha, and I live on Prospect. And we have people going down our street 50 miles an hour just to avoid Institute. And there's an intersection where there's accidents all the time on Prospect and High. And we asked for a four-way stop sign. That's a reasonable solution for some of these back streets. Stop people from speeding, or we were told they don't do speed bumps anymore, but maybe putting up more four-way stop signs on some of these streets.
And then you can pass, when you're done, you can just pass it to your neighbor. Yep.
Hi, my name is Gypsy, and I have to amplify the comment that you made. We also live on Prospect, very close to Platte, and it's a very short street, but it's incredible the number of speeding vehicles that zip across Prospect, and a lot of them are just doing a quick U-turn. And I think that's going to be worse with these one-way streets, because they're going to come one way and zip across and then go the other way and use that street for a U-turn. And there are so many accidents on that, by that underpass on Platte, with people just screaming across, trying to get across Platte. And there are fatalities. There are so many accidents. So I reiterate what you're saying.
So I don't know that too many questions were put to you there. Another one on the rail, yep.
Hey everyone, my name is Brissa. I do live on Platte and Prospect as well, and I can attest with her as well. There are a ton of cars that just blast through Platte. It's not even funny. I don't know why you guys think that a one-way street would resolve this. I lived in LA before, and one-way streets only need one thing: speeding. That's all it does. It just gives an idea that there's only one traffic direction and only one way of avoiding other cars. If we turn that into a one-way street, you're just encouraging more for speeding. Before pre-COVID, we used to have a speed trap right by Wasatch. That disappeared afterwards, and I don't know whatever happened to that. But now we don't have anything to enforce or stop speeders. Now you're saying that a one-way street is going to stop speeding and adding more lights? That does not make sense at all. People are already breaking that, they're already blasting through. What are we doing to enforce the laws that we already have? What are we doing to stop them? They're still doing it. A one-way street is not going to stop them.
Hi, my name is Jill, and
We live on a ladder street, and my concern is for our alley that would go to Boulder and Platte, that we have to turn into the left lane when turning off our alley, or off a ladder street that does not have a signal. Have you thought about that as far as safety aspects?
Okay, I think you guys can try to tackle all of those various points. I'll try to summarize. A lot of them seem to be comments rather than questions, just wanting to make sure that you hear the concern regarding those rails. I heard a comment about our alleys, which in this neighborhood do often get utilized as small streets. And I heard a lot about Prospect and Platte.
So I will say one of the things I heard loud and clear, and I hear it every single day that I wake up and do this job, and it is about speeding in our city. It's about speeding on my street. It's about speeding in every part of District 5. It's about speeding in every part of Colorado Springs. I hear you. I watched a guy go 70 miles an hour down Columbia and ran through a stop sign without knowing he was potentially going to get killed. Right? I could not believe it. So I don't know what the solution to that is. We do not have the police force we need to be able to do the kind of things that I hear you wanting. We don't. We are understaffed in the police force. We do not have it. And that's another conversation for another time. Happy to have it with you. Really happy to have it with you. I care about it very much. So policing is part of the solution to speeding in traffic. We are focusing on traffic engineering solutions, and that's not my area of expertise.
Do you want to speak to some of like the speed dampening measures that you've considered for the project that you might be able to put into place, or do we want to move on?
Well, I think one of the requests is you were told to request, you had to call in to get some data or some study.
That I would have to initiate a traffic study myself. And my question was, how can you present a proposal without having studied the entire corridor as defined by the proposal?
And I think the comment was probably that if there's a problem today, the study isn't looking at that from a today standpoint, it's looking at future improvements. So if you feel like you have a challenge in that neighborhood now with speeds, you can request a speed study, and then the city will do an analysis and figure out the percentiles. Unfortunately, a lot of times when we do that, it's really the top 5, there's like 5% of the speed are really speeding through some of these areas. So it's not as predominant as it feels like it being adjacent to it.
I think what I hear her asking though is that her question is how can you be looking at east-west without going a bit further to some of these other side streets. I think that's the question in studying the volumes on those streets.
Part of your corridor definition.
Yeah, and we do look at that when we do the traffic analysis. Basically, as you look at what are the capacity of these roadways, you have to assess there's a threshold where drivers are like water, they take the easiest path. So if we create backups, people will find alternate routes, that's the reality. And so the analysis that's done is to show, well, are we passing that threshold where we would create backups that would tend to make drivers self-reroute?
So you've actually done studies on
well,
Wilmette?
That we have not looked to Willamette. We can look within the Platte, and we looked within the Platte and Boulder corridor.
And Willamette is part of the corridor.
And the intersecting streets, and the analysis showed with the 2 alternatives that we had, that those would not tend to make drivers seek alternate routes. So then the analysis says I don't really need to go count traffic on Willamette because it shouldn't be influenced by this project.
So here's what I'm going to say. Thank you. Okay, I appreciate the laughter as opposed to pitchforks. So that's great. But So here's what I'm just gonna say. I'm hearing the neighbors say that they feel that and here I'm getting cut off by my own phone. They feel that like there needs to be an analysis of the entire area and, you know, to use the water analogy, not just like where's the flow gonna go on Platte and Boulder, but also Willamette and those other streets, right? So I do wanna note, we have just about 8 minutes left before I said I was going to bring us to a summary, and there are always people who are less assertive and a little more quiet and have not had a chance yet. So I'm going to try to pass the mic to those folks right here first. You've not had a chance yet?
No, I have not. Thank you. My name is John Marshall. I'm a professional engineer, and I live right over here on Platte. And I am nervous. Wow.
You're doing good. You're doing
No,
good.
I'm fine. This is great. I'm going to read this real quick, and then I'm going to ask a question, because I want our community to be prosperous and safe and awesome. This is from a book that I have been reading really recently, Confessions of a Recovering Engineer. And it is by Charles Marone. He is from Strong Towns. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with them. It sounds like it. I would say this is absolutely imperative reading for anyone who's doing public work on traffic. And I would recommend this book to any of you who are curious about the details of traffic engineering, because this is fantastic. I'm going to read one of the most important statements that I found in this book, and it says, "The low-risk side of our public investment portfolio is as obvious as it is boring. Local governments must prioritize basic, routine maintenance in neighborhoods with high financial productivity, that is, high value per acre." So my question is kind of piggybacking off of Chris. Actually, he left. But if we may be entering a recession soon, do we have some estimates on the cost of this? What would that cost look like for the community? Where does that money come from? And then what is the cost of doing nothing? What if we left it as it is and we used all that money that we spent on it fixing the potholes? And I ask this question honestly, and I think if this corridor study turns out that the money we invest in this corridor is well invested, I am all for it. But to just show the other side of things, like sometimes doing nothing is actually better than making improvements. Thank you.
The challenge we have too is we do need to do some bridge projects, no matter what.
That's safety.
We have to replace the Platte over Shooks Run Bridge that was built in 1902. It's definitely reached the end of its service life. The El Paso Street Bridge got hit by a forklift underneath it. We're filing a claim for that, so we're probably going to get some insurance money with that. So we got to fix that, which also includes the Shooks Run Trail and the one-way return road. So those 3 bridges with all the walls and everything is a big chunk of money, and we're going to have to do that. The improvements that we were looking at with Boulder, because we would,
Nobody's driving over there anymore.
I don't want to close Platte over Shooks Run, where we have to close the road.
Do you have an engineering study that shows those walls are in danger of falling?
We do have an engineering study from 2010 that details those walls are seriously deteriorated.
Are those open to the public? I would like to see that, and I would like to see all your data for this proposal.
Sure. Well, yes, we'd be glad to do that. You put that request in, we can do that. But we spent.
Put that in.
We're going to try to stick with the microphone format.
Yep.
So, yeah. So,
you want to summarize? So I appreciate your comment, and I do appreciate another engineer in the room. That's very, very helpful. And we do try it. We try to do it our best. I mean, sometimes things, don't work out like we want them. I drive by projects that I did 10 years ago, and I'm like, man, I wish I would have done that just a little bit differently. I could have solved that bicycle issue or something with the bump out.
Brandon's next. Oh, Brandon, I already handed it to him, and he can go.
Hey friends, Brandon, the owner of this location, thank you for joining me here. Two quick questions for you. Many cities I've seen that have, basically they've done the 2 lanes and 2 lanes, but then the middle lane switches based on early in the day it goes one direction and early in the day it goes, later in the day it goes the other direction. Have you guys looked at that for Platte instead of making that to add for the traffic patterns? I don't know if those will work or not. I see them in almost every other larger city, just not ours. And then the second thing is, data seems to suggest that businesses suffer when there's a one-way instead of a 2-lane. And so have you guys done studies on that to kind of see what sort of business effect that you're going to do? Because I think that's part of the reason why the downtown authority is actually removing, or at least proposing to remove the 2 one-ways downtown. And so we're trying to remove those, but then add 2 other ones. That doesn't seem to be congruent. And I think a lot of that is because of businesses and what's going on there. So could you address both of those things, please?
So, business considerations and economic opportunity was certainly a big part of what we're trying to pay attention to. We've worked closely, but let me do the downtown section first. The downtown partnership we've worked with closely. They have been in support of what we recommended down there with the lane reduction on Platte, and with, rather than converting Bijou and Kiowa to 2-way streets, that was a challenge to try and get that to work from a traffic perspective. But we did talk to them about what other ways can we accomplish those goals of trying to make those businesses on Bijou and Kiowa more successful. And one of their major concerns was that those pedestrian spaces are very narrow. The sidewalks on those 2 streets happen to be some of the narrowest in the downtown area. So that's why working with them, we came up with doing a lane reduction on Bijou and Kiowa, which also shows up in the information that we presented. We do have to do some other adjustments, but we can do that from a traffic perspective. So it's trying to figure out what those trade-offs are. For this, both Middle Shooks Run and the Nob Hill area. The Nob Hill area was a very important part of this study. We worked closely with groups out there. The Nob Hill Urban Arts District was involved in a lot of our workshops. They voiced strong support for this with the dedicated transit lanes. One of the reasons for those dedicated transit lanes is that is a threshold for transit where study after study across the country has shown that kind of commitment to transit actually does elevate property values, which helps businesses develop.
Congratulations. That's what the county says. I've already passed the microphone back over here.
My name's Eric. You mentioned earlier that there's 18,000 cars on Platte, 10,000 cars on Boulder. How's the additional 4,000 cars on Boulder going to benefit our community? And if you're going to say it's going to slow the speed, couldn't we accomplish the same with a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit? If you're going to say that pedestrians can cross 3 lanes instead of 4, couldn't we get more crossings like at the corner of El Paso? There's also no left turn signals at Institute and Hancock, so we could adjust the traffic lights right now on those, and we could be good to go to get things flowing. So if you could address those issues.
So again, you are correct in your math in your head, or at least as quick as I can figure it out. Yes, traffic would increase on Boulder, but it would be in fewer lanes, and traffic would also be reduced. Traffic would also be reduced on Platte. Again, this is a corridor study. We're trying to look at the benefits for the entire neighborhood, which does include Platte Avenue, And so that was what we put out there, about exploring trade-offs. Again, we understand that it creates change on Boulder, and I'm not saying we all have to learn how to deal with change. I'm just saying that's the trade-off we make when we're trying to achieve these objectives worldwide.
Seems like there are no negatives on Platte, all the negatives on Boulder,
So,
including the hospital.
I've handed the microphone off to what is likely our last question if we're going to have time to summarize and talk about next steps, but I might be able to squeeze in one or two more if anybody has anything burning, so go right ahead.
Pretty good, Brett.
What's your favorite color?
Yeah, sorry, my name is Britt, resident here on Boulder. I'm not only concerned about what this would do, but also in the future. I know you said the reduced lane would still be enough.
The reduced lanes would still be enough to get all the traffic through up until 2045 or some projection or whatnot. I'm not sure I necessarily buy that. I think we would be having a meeting right here again in 10 years once you've done everything, and you're going to be saying, sorry Boulder, we actually need to scrap some of these other lanes so that there's 4 lanes of traffic and a bus lane. You're going to lose your street parking and bus lanes. Tough luck. So that's what I'm worried about. No question, just concern.
Yeah. Did you want to speak to that, or it was mostly a statement, not a question?
Can we address it though for the next time? We'll put it on the agenda and talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
So I do want to start to kind of wind us down here, because I'm showing that we only have about 9 minutes left before we promised Brandon that we would be leaving his lovely establishment. So, and thank you again, Brandon, so much. So I do want us to talk about next steps. I'm going to summarize that I've heard a number of concerns. There's some that many people share around the hospital and kind of the rails of the ladder and speed and safety. And then there were some other, specific ones. I am hearing that there's going to be another opportunity for us to meet together, and specifically you're going to hold a character conversation. I'm not calling that the right thing.
Like a workshop or a
Character workshop, okay. And how will people find out about that? And, date, time, location?
Well, I think that's something we can coordinate with you. I don't know if you can provide us email contacts, or, we have a project email list that we sent out. Obviously, it's not reaching enough people, so we do need to try and reach as many people as we're here tonight to come to that. Hopefully, we're also having some representatives from stakeholders like the hospital, some representatives from the Nob Hill Arts or Nob Hill area as well, because we have to come up with a solution that works throughout the corridor. And in terms of format, again, at some point we need to figure out, because we would like to schedule it when we can get the most people there. So we're flexible on, does it need to be in the evening? Does it need to be during the day? Does it need to be on the weekend? We need some help planning that.
My own phone is telling me that I won the Academy Awards. So I'm gonna use a trick I used when I was running groups with adolescents. How many people, thumbs up, would need an evening workshop in order to attend? I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up for that. How many people would need a daytime workshop in order to attend? How about they would need a weekend workshop in order to attend?
Suggestion, an A and B meeting, A in the morning, B in the evening, 7 different days.
So I'm hearing a suggestion for 2 different options, but I also saw that the vast majority of people would need an evening meeting in order to attend. So I think that kind of gives you that information for moving forward. I personally would request that if at all possible, it be a location local in our neighborhood. I think that was really important to us in selecting this particular location for this meeting, because we wanted it to be sort of centralized where a lot of the energy was on the topic. So if that's possible for you to do it somewhere in our neighborhood, I think that would be appreciated as well. But I'm having struggled to look for a meeting location. I understand the challenge of that. Yes.
You've got relationships with 2 churches here that we make really easy.
Elementary school, yeah.
And we're probably gonna take a real interest in, because we need a certain setup, or the people that are gonna run that are gonna need a certain setup, because that workshop is there to generate ideas, not to rehash out. Certainly you can speak to your concern when we're coming up with ideas, but it's there to generate ideas and things that we can work on as a project team to advance to see how those ideas might work to make this better. The one other thing I'd say is likely that charrette would have both, or workshop would have both public, where all of you are welcome to come, as well as some dedicated time for the project team and others to really dig into the details and start drawing up some of those ideas. So one of the things we'll continue to work with you is there a smaller group that could represent the concerns and ideas of the entire group?
We can certainly talk about that. So then moving forward again, we are going to be putting out a letter that summarizes our content from this evening. Your Mid-Chicks Run Neighborhood Association will be doing that. Are there other requests or other ideas for steps moving forward that maybe we haven't thought of, that people want to be heard on?
I want to let you know that I will be sending out to you, Cheryl. There were 2 very specific requests and questions. One about the traffic flow data on Boulder and Platte, the start-stop dates. I got all of that. I got that question, and I will send it to folks at the city for answers and back to you. And the other thing I heard was a request for data on the safety of the bridge at Platte and with Walsh, El Paso. So I'll work to help make that available as well through Cheryl. So I got those very specific takeaways. The other thing I heard, I just wanted to say, I heard overall, I heard significant concern about Memorial Hospital, access and all the things that go with that. I heard a lot of concern about parking. I heard concern about transit. I heard concern about the side streets and the alleys and the increase of traffic there and safety overall and speed and other ways to mitigate that. You know, and I heard overall a desire to be in, you know, engagement with how this happens. And I hope that, my hope is, well, first of all, let me say, I'm a city council person. I'm an elected official. You may or may not have voted for me. I don't know, and honestly, I don't care because I'm here and I'm here to serve you. I mean, I do care if you voted for me, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in terms of my investment in listening to you and being your representative. So I am your representative. I don't work for the city. I don't make these plans. I care about safety. I care about equity. I care about, you know, all those things, right? I care about that immensely. And I also do have to say, and this is a reality, y'all, there is a Nob Hill neighborhood, and that's part of District 5 too. There are other neighborhoods that have competing priorities with you. So I just say that because it's true. And I need to listen to all of the residents of District 5. I represent all of them. And as you know, these things are tensions and there are always going to be trade-offs, and I guarantee you whatever ends up happening, if this ever even gets funded, we are talking here about solutions, folks. This is not happening tomorrow. And I work really hard at working in partnership and through relationship with all city employees, whether it's the police, fire, traffic, planning. You know, they're public servants, they're doing the best that they can. Are there good ones? Are there bad ones? You bet. It's a city. It's people. I work by trying to build relationship and listening to everybody. So I just want you to know that and hear that, and those are some of the realities. And I am I work very hard to be responsive. I'm sure I don't have a 100% score on that, but I work on getting back to people within 24 hours if I can. And I know some of you will attest that I respond. And you may not always like my answer, or I may not always be able to get you what you need, but oftentimes I can. So that's all I have to say, and I just want to thank you for that.
We do need to end. If we could just thank our guests for coming and enduring the... And thank you all for coming. Thank you for being invested and caring about your neighborhood. So I do know that there were some people that did want to continue conversation about next steps. You're welcome to use the patio. Brandon has let me know that. I know Cindy in particular wanted to kind of gather with people on the patio and chat. Thank you so much.